My heels were too high for grass. That's the first thing I noticed when I stepped into the makeshift garden aisle at Marigold Estate, trying to avoid sinking into the manicured lawn while pretending not to notice that I wasn't listed on the seating chart. Not as a bridesmaid. Not at the family table. Just not. I hovered like a poorly dressed wedding crasher, clutching my envelope with a neatly signed card and a check I'd debated for weeks. I wasn't supposed to be invisible at my own sister's wedding, but somehow I was. The servers moved around me as if I were decor, something placed in the wrong corner. No one asked me if I needed a drink. My mother, eyes laser-focused on the groom's family, gave me a tight-lipped nod that said, "Don't make this about you." My father didn't even nod. He was already 2 cocktails in, schmoozing with the groom's hedge fund friends like it was his own retirement party. I found a seat on the far edge of the courtyard, under a creaky metal arch woven with fresh orchids. Someone must have canceled, because the chair had a gold place card that read, Alexis Morel. I wasn't Alexis. I sat down anyway. That's where I saw him. Graham Durrell. CEO, groom, my sister Emily's new husband, and the man who had once smiled at me across a conference table and said, "You're good but not built for real risk. You'll thank me someday for this lesson." He hadn't recognized me then as Emily's sister. It was a closed-door investor debrief 3 years ago. I was a junior analyst. He'd shredded my memo, an internal audit trail I'd quietly flagged for errors. It disappeared after that. So did my promotion. He walked past me now like he didn't remember that moment, or like he very much did. Emily was glowing. Of course she was. She always had that ability to become light in rooms where I became static. Her dress was too expensive, her skin airbrushed by lighting, and her joy, real or curated, was just believable enough to fool everyone. "Are you the photographer's assistant?" one of the guests asked me as she squeezed by. "No," I replied flatly. "Oh," she said, then kept walking. The ceremony started without me. I mean, I was there, but I wasn't in it. Not in the wedding party, not in the readings, not even in the post-vow family photo rush. I tried not to care. I counted petals on the floral arch, I rubbed my thumb over the edge of my champagne glass, and I remembered the tiny jade pendant around my neck. A gift from Emily when we were 12 and 10, meant to ward off nightmares. I wore it anyway. Dinner was a blur of buttered scallops and silence. The speeches began, starting with Graham's brother and Emily's maid of honor. Then it was Graham's turn. That's when it happened. He stood up, lifted his flute, and said, "Marrying Emily was the easiest decision I ever made. She's honest, loyal, and most importantly, she keeps me honest too." People chuckled. "Some of you know," he continued, "running a billion-dollar fund means you're only as strong as your integrity, and my wife reminds me of that every day." My jaw twitched. He looked at her like she was salvation. She smiled, teary-eyed. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. My father raised his glass and said, "To honor." But I couldn't lift mine. I couldn't even swallow. Because in that moment, my mind rewound, not just to the memo he'd buried, not just to how Emily had jumped 2 job levels in a year, but to something I'd nearly forgotten. Something I saw months ago, tucked in a financial presentation slide Emily had asked me to glance at, just for fun. Something that didn't make sense then and made even less sense now. And that's when it hit me. Graham didn't ignore me because he didn't recognize me. He ignored me because he did. The man knew exactly who I was. He knew what I knew, and he was hoping I'd keep sitting there. Silent, small, eroded by years of being overshadowed by my brilliant sister. I felt my hand grip the base of my wine glass like it was the only real thing in the world. Someone laughed at his joke about regulatory paperwork being the real spouse. He smiled, full of teeth. The room buzzed with tipsy goodwill. But I saw his hand tremble just slightly as he poured a new glass of Dom. And in that tremor, I realized he wasn't invincible. He was hoping I still was. That I was still the girl who lost her job and said nothing. Still the daughter who watched her parents gush over a man who once made her invisible in a boardroom. Still the sister who let herself become a footnote in someone else's fairy tale. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I turned the jade pendant between my fingers. It had meant safety once. Now it meant memory. And maybe clarity. I looked down at the champagne bubbles. I rehearsed the sentence once in my head. The sentence I wasn't sure I had the courage to say. Then I looked up, and I smiled, just enough to feel the weight shift. Because some sentences don't need rehearsals. Some sentences just need timing, and I already knew when I'd say it. My name is Claire Everson. I'm 34, a forensic accounting consultant, and I live a quiet life in a quiet building with creaky elevators and honest rent. I work out of a small office above a bookstore, mostly untangling tax filings for nonprofits and quietly auditing statements that look too good to be true. I used to dream bigger. I used to think I'd climb the ranks at GDS Capital like my sister did. But then I learned that some ladders are nailed in place, and some people are born on roofs pretending they climbed there. The day Emily told us she was dating Graham Dorrell, I almost choked on my tea. We were at Mom's house, a Sunday lunch, everything glazed with butter and fake politeness. Emily, ever the golden child, leaned in with her trademark sparkle and said, "I have news. Graham and I are together." Mom gasped, Dad clapped, I blinked. "You mean your boss?" I said slowly. "Former boss," she corrected with a grin. "We're keeping it professional at work. He's not technically in my chain of command anymore." But he had been. He was. Graham had hired her right out of her MBA program, hand-picked, he'd said, and promoted her faster than anyone else at the firm. She'd leapt past me in less than a year, and I had been there 4. I tried to be happy for her. I really did. But a part of me kept replaying that moment in the glass-walled conference room, when he'd dismissed my concerns over duplicated fund activity, when I'd been told my tone didn't inspire confidence, when I was quietly let go after restructuring hit only one analyst team, mine, and then she moved in with him, and then they got engaged. I didn't say a word, because by then, Emily didn't really speak to me unless it was to ask for favors. Tiny ones. "Can you look over this spreadsheet real quick? Is it normal for deferred tax to carry like this?" Harmless, curious things. I'd always oblige, because even after everything, I loved her. We weren't close, but we were sisters, and in some twisted way, I thought she didn't know. Not really. I thought maybe she hadn't connected the dots, that the job she now had used to be mine in every way but title. I clung to that excuse. I let it soften the betrayal. But then, 6 months before the wedding, she came to me in a panic. "Claire, do you have a moment? Just quick," she'd said breathless over the phone. "Graham asked me to pull together a slide deck for this mid-cycle review. It's a mess. Could you give it a once-over? Just your magic eyes?" I said yes, because that's what I did. I was the helper, the fixer, the woman in the background making sure things held. I remember the file. I remember it vividly now. There was a chart, obscure but not irrelevant, tracking internal asset churn across several subsidiary funds. It looked wrong. It looked too consistent. 2 identical lines for funds that had 0 correlation. One marked strategic repositioning, one labeled Q2 variance smoothing. But the same line, same slope, same weekly deltas. It wasn't an error, it was a mask. Someone had overlaid fabricated projections onto real performance. It screamed manipulation. I circled it and emailed her, "Hey, flagging this. These funds shouldn't mirror each other. May want to double-check sources." She wrote back 2 hours later, "Graham said it's intentional, just a presentation quirk. Don't overthink." The smiley face hit harder than the brush-off. That's when I knew. She knew exactly what she was covering for, and she was doing it anyway. After that, things shifted between us. Subtly, but irrevocably. I stopped picking up her calls. She stopped sending files. We talked only in group threads, and even those were stale. When the wedding invite came, hand-delivered by Mom with a forced smile, I almost didn't go. But not going would have made me look bitter. Petty, like the forgotten sister sulking in the shadows of success. So I RSVP'd yes. I found a deep emerald dress, tasteful and quiet, and booked a hotel nearby. I told myself it was closure. I told myself it was for Emily. But it wasn't. It was for me. To witness it. To see one last time what had become of the girl who used to braid my hair at camp and cry when she lost Monopoly. The sister who had once whispered, "We'll never let a man come between us." The same sister who now sipped champagne on a yacht-sized venue, paid for by a man who had taken everything from me and handed it to her. I kept wondering when she changed. Or maybe she never did. Maybe I just stopped pretending not to notice. At the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding, I sat alone at the end of a long mahogany table. The place card said, "Miss C. Everson." Everyone else got first names. Everyone else got hugged. Graham gave a short welcome speech, thanking everyone for believing in love and partnership. He called my parents by name. He toasted his best man, his CFO, the florist, even his dog walker. He did not mention me. When the plates were cleared, he walked past my chair without pause. I'd spent years studying silence. In boardrooms, in statements, in families. And his was loud. Loud in a way that made my hands clench and my throat tighten. Loud in the way predators walk by their prey, trusting it won't bite. That's when I started pulling up the old email on my phone. The one I'd sent Emily. The one with the chart. The one she had forwarded, stupidly, recklessly, without removing my original message. It was still there, still untouched. The chain of evidence, complete. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I had it. And that meant he didn't own the silence anymore. When I got back to my hotel room that night, I opened my laptop. I dug through old folders, searched archive databases I still had access to through client portals, cross-checked the fund IDs with SEC quarterly filings. I wasn't technically supposed to have access to that many dashboards anymore. But I did. Because while Emily played the game, I never stopped learning how it was rigged. The fraud was there, quiet but bold. Fund recycling across entities that were technically separate but structurally co-owned. Inflated valuation windows. Delayed loss recognition hidden under predictive modeling techniques. Words meant to impress, not explain. He wasn't just fudging numbers. He was committing felony-level fraud, and Emily had helped him shape the narrative. With my own notes, she was complicit. Maybe she didn't know the depth, or maybe she did. Either way, she didn't stop it, and neither had I. Until now. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window and watched the wind press against the curtains. I touched the jade pendant and thought of the night Emily gave it to me, how we had promised each other safety, loyalty. That no matter where life went, we would hold on to each other. Now that tiny stone was the only thing of her I could still trust. The woman in that white dress wasn't my sister anymore. She was someone else now. But I still believed she deserved the truth, even if it hurt, even if it shattered everything. I woke up the morning of the wedding with a calm I didn't trust. It wasn't peace, it was stillness. The kind that settles over you when the fight has already happened inside, and the only thing left is action. No more questions, no more hesitations. I'd packed my laptop in a tote under the guise of remote work emergencies. I brought a printout of the email chain, folded once and tucked into the same envelope that held my card and gift check. I slipped the jade pendant over my head and let it rest cold against my collarbone. I was done being ignored. Still, I wasn't planning to make a scene. I wasn't that person. I didn't want to ruin her day. Despite everything, some part of me still wanted Emily to be happy. Or at least spared from the worst of it. But truth doesn't always wait for convenient timing. Sometimes it walks straight into a ballroom with a string quartet, playing Coldplay covers, and hands you a glass of truth chilled to perfection. The reception was everything, a luxury magazine spread dreams of, high ceilings strung with filament bulbs, waiters in black gloves passing hors d'oeuvres on mirrored trays, guests dripping wealth and Botox in equal measure. Every detail had been curated to within an inch of its life. I wasn't listed on the family table, again. Instead, I was seated at table 17 with the cousins who never remembered my name and Graham's second-tier work friends. They talked about Bitcoin and golf memberships. I nodded politely and quietly counted the minutes to the toast. Graham hadn't made eye contact with me once. Emily gave a thank you speech first. She looked radiant and nervous. Her voice cracked when she thanked Graham for seeing her potential before she could. My mother dabbed her eyes again, my father patted her hand, and then Graham stood, flute in hand, confident, polished, charming. The room silenced itself like it always did for men like him. He started slow. Thank you all for being here. Today has been more beautiful than I ever imagined. Emily, he turned toward her, voice softening just a bit, you have made me a better man. He paused for applause. Got it. He smiled and continued. I've built businesses. I've weathered markets. I've seen partners come and go. But nothing has tested me more than learning to love honestly. My hands were folded neatly in my lap. He lifted his glass. We talk a lot about ethics in my world. Risk management, accountability. But Emily taught me that true integrity isn't what you say in boardrooms, it's what you live at home. Something shifted in me. A cold, steady push forward. And I know, he continued, that no matter what challenges come, we'll face them with transparency and trust. That was it. That was the sentence. I stood, quietly, deliberately. He noticed. His eyes flicked to me, fast like a reflex. There was something almost animal in that glance, a threat detected. Excuse me, I said, voice clear but not loud. Before we toast to integrity. Chairs turned, eyebrows lifted. I unfolded the single sheet of paper I'd placed beside my wine glass. I just want to confirm something with the groom. Graham's smile twitched. Claire, this isn't really the... No, I'll be quick. I held up the paper. Do you recall this chart? Emily was frozen. My mother looked confused. My father stiffened. It's from a deck you presented to your investors last quarter. You labeled this line Q2 variance smoothing, but that same data stream appears under a different label in an earlier filing. Duplicated. A beat. Silence. Confusion morphing into curiosity. Graham opened his mouth, then closed it. I continued. The SEC defines that as a misrepresentation of fund allocation, and when used to inflate return projections, that's securities fraud. Now the silence wasn't polite, it was panic-laced. I wasn't yelling, I didn't need to, I was stating facts. You used my sister to do it, I said, voice lower now. You used her name, her account credentials, her access, and she trusted you. Emily stood. Claire, what are you? Check your email, I said quietly. I sent you everything this morning. Graham looked at her then. Really looked. Something flickered in his face that I'd never seen before. Fear. Actual, naked fear. Someone at a nearby table muttered, Jesus Christ. I turned to the rest of the guests. If anyone here works in finance, you might want to consider what exposure your portfolios have to GDS Capital, because in 48 hours I guarantee this will be a headline. I sat down. Glass still full. Hands steady. Heart like a hammer inside my chest. Graham remained standing for a moment longer, frozen in place, flute trembling in his grip. Then he sat too. Hard. The toast was over. No one clapped. It didn't take long. Whispers swept through the room like wildfire. Phones came out. Google searches started. Some guests left early. Others approached me quietly, asking questions I didn't fully answer. I wasn't trying to explain. That moment wasn't about justice in its entirety. It was about leverage, and I had finally taken mine back. Emily disappeared into a side hallway with our mother. Graham was nowhere to be seen. I waited 10 minutes, then 15. Finally, I walked out the side door into the smoking courtyard. That's where I found him, Graham, sitting alone on a bench, phone in hand, white as salt. You planned this, he said without looking up. No, I replied. You did. He let out a hollow laugh. You've just ruined your sister's life. No, I said again. You did that too. I just stopped helping you hide it. He looked at me then. Really looked, and for once there was no condescension in his eyes, just recognition. I underestimated you, he said. You always did. I left him there. That same bench where he had once fired me without saying the word. This time he had no power to take anything, and I had nothing left to lose. Later that night, Emily knocked on my hotel room door. Her mascara was streaked. Her hair had come undone. She looked small. I read the email, she said. All of it. I nodded. You knew for months? I nodded again. Why didn't you tell me? You wouldn't have listened, I said softly. Not if it came from me. She opened her mouth, closed it. I thought I was protecting you, I added. But maybe I just didn't want to see it either. She slumped into the chair beside the window. It's all real, isn't it? The numbers? Yes. Her fingers fumbled at her neck. She touched the hollow there like something was missing. Then she looked at me. Really looked. I wore mine today, I said, gesturing to the jade pendant. You gave it to me. Her eyes flooded. I remember, she whispered. I told you it would keep us safe. I nodded once. Maybe it still did. They always tell you a wedding should be the happiest day of your life. But no one tells you what to do when the veil drops, not just from the bride's face, but from the entire illusion you've wrapped your world in. By the time I returned to the ballroom, half the tables were deserted. People had either left or moved closer to someone they trusted. The band kept playing, but quieter now, like even the music understood something irreversible had just unfolded. Emily didn't reappear for another hour, and when she did, her dress was wrinkled. Her makeup had been wiped away entirely. She walked in alone, no husband at her side, no apology on her face. She walked toward me, and the room gave her space. I rose when she got close, expecting an argument or tears or worse, the icy dismissal she'd perfected over the years. But instead she said, "You were right." 3 words, heavy ones. I didn't know what to say. "I don't need to know why you waited," she added. I see it now, all of it." And with that, she turned to the crowd. Emily Everson Dorrell, newly married, newly broken, and yet, for the first time in years, fully herself, walked to the mic. She didn't ask permission. She didn't look for Graham. He wasn't there anymore. He'd slipped out sometime between my sentence and the first wave of gasps, like a rat from a collapsing house. Emily took a breath. "I want to thank you all for being here. I realize this may be the most confusing night of your lives, and maybe the most humiliating of mine." She didn't shake. Her voice didn't crack. She stood straighter than I'd seen in months, maybe years. I believed I was marrying a man who respected truth. But it seems I was only in love with the version of him that I helped sell to others. That ends now. Murmurs. Some people clapped. Others just stared. She continued. "I will be cooperating with authorities. I have already contacted legal counsel and intend to fully disclose anything I unknowingly contributed to. My name will not be a shield for someone else's crime." Now the room was silent. "I also want to thank my sister," she said. Heads turned toward me. She tried to protect me before I was ready to listen, and even now, she did it with more grace than I deserved. My heart thudded. I had been prepared for many things that night. Screams, accusations, doors slammed forever. I hadn't prepared for forgiveness, least of all hers. "I hope someday," she added, "I can be that brave." Then she stepped down. No music resumed, no one toasted, but people watched. Not with pity. with respect. And that meant more than applause. The aftermath was fast and brutal. News broke within 48 hours. Anonymous tips had been sent to multiple outlets, none by me, but I had my guesses. GES Capital released a tight-lipped statement about leadership restructuring. The SEC opened a formal investigation within a week. Graham's accounts were frozen. He vanished off social media. His LinkedIn quietly disappeared. Some sources said he fled the country. Others whispered about Swiss lawyers and a sealed indictment. Emily filed for annulment. And I was asked to consult. Quietly, discreetly, but meaningfully. Apparently, when you reveal a multi-million-dollar fraud at a wedding and back it with clean, documented evidence, people start taking your emails seriously again. I was offered a role on the advisory board of a compliance nonprofit. I declined. I wasn't ready to turn this into a brand, but I agreed to help with certain pro bono cases, especially those involving women pressured to sign things they didn't understand. That became my line in the sand. Not just revenge, repair. My parents didn't call for a week. Then one evening, I got a voicemail from my father, short, dry. His voice cracked only once. "Claire, your mother and we didn't see it. We should've. I should've. I'm sorry." That was it. I didn't call back, not right away. Some things take longer to heal than others, but I saved the message. Because it mattered. Emily and I started meeting once a week. Nothing dramatic. Coffee, a walk. Sometimes we didn't even talk about what happened. We just existed, side by side. Like we were rebuilding something old with new materials. She sold her engagement ring and moved into a smaller apartment. Started teaching part-time at a community college. One day, I noticed she was wearing a pendant around her neck, small and green. "Jade?" I asked. She nodded. I found another one, not the same, but close. I figured it was time I started carrying the weight too. We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to. Graham's name still pops up sometimes, an article here, a case summary there, but always in past tense, always with a hint of scandal. He's no longer an empire, just a cautionary tale. And me? I still work above the bookstore, still drink my same bitter coffee, still audit quiet truths, but now people know my name, and when they don't, I make sure they learn it. Because I've learned that sometimes the most powerful sentence isn't screamed in rage or whispered in pain. Sometimes it's simply said when no one expects it. When the room believes you're too polite to speak, too erased to be dangerous, too small to matter. And then, when you say it anyway, it changes everything. Because that sentence, that was mine. And they'll remember it forever. It's strange, the quiet that follows a storm you've been carrying inside you for years. I thought I'd feel victorious, maybe even a little smug. But all I felt in the weeks after was tired. Tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Like something deep inside you has finally let go, and the letting go hurts more than the holding ever did. The headlines came and went. Wedding whistleblower exposes hedge fund fraud. Bride blindsided as groom flees amid CC probe. One outlet dubbed it the vow and the verdict. Another published a full spread on Emily's dress with a sidebar on financial red flags in relationships. Only a few mentioned me by name. Fewer still got it right. That was fine. I hadn't done it for recognition. But something changed after the fallout, not just for Emily, but for me. In the silence that followed, people finally started listening. Not just to what I said, but to the way I said it. I wasn't the angry sister. I wasn't the jealous analyst. I was the woman who had warned them, quietly, over and over, until I no longer had to. I got calls, from firms I hadn't heard from in years, from former colleagues who had once slipped past me in elevators, from women who had signed NDAs they didn't understand and wanted help deciphering the fine print. I said yes to some, no to many. But each time I remembered what it felt like to be erased, and I made damn sure they weren't. Emily kept her promise. She handed over everything, emails, access logs, version history. She testified under sealed deposition. She didn't hide, didn't flinch, even when her own job history was questioned. She was cleared, not because she was innocent exactly, but because she cooperated fully. Because she told the truth the moment it finally mattered. That was enough for the prosecutors. I told her once, over tea, you could have gone down with him. She stared at her cup for a long time before saying, I almost did. She still wore the second jade pendant. It rested near her heart like it was guarding something fragile and growing. She was rebuilding, in her own way. Not everyone forgave her. Some friends drifted. A few called her complicit, but she didn't chase them. She said, I earned their silence. Now I'll earn something better. And I believed her. Our parents took longer to process. My mother avoided the topic entirely for weeks. She made small talk when we met, asked about work, complimented my haircut, but never said the words. Until one Sunday, she handed me a small box over lunch. Inside was the original pendant, the twin to Emily's. I found it in your old room, she said. Figured you'd want it back. I blinked. This is Emily's. She shook her head. That one was yours. Emily wore hers the day of the wedding. This one was always yours. I held it between my fingers, the weight smaller than I remembered. I didn't know, she said, voice barely above a whisper. How much you gave up. How much you knew. I thought you were bitter. I looked up. I was, I said, but not the way you think. She nodded. I see that now. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest thing I'd ever get. And it was enough. I never saw Graham again. Rumor had it he was living in Dubai or Singapore, or maybe hiding in plain sight under a different name, with a new fiancée and a very sanitized past. Fraudsters have a way of resurfacing. Different city, same script. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't afraid of him. I wasn't even angry, because his power had always lived in our silence. And now that silence was gone. What remained was just noise. And I knew how to tune it out. People ask me now sometimes what the exact sentence was. The one I said that froze him mid-toast. The one that turned the entire wedding into a reckoning. I've seen it quoted in articles, reposted in pieces, turned into viral captions, but none of them get it exactly right. The sentence wasn't magical. It wasn't even that clever. It was just this. Before we toast to integrity, I want to confirm something with the groom. That's it. 12 words. Not an accusation. Not a threat. Just a gentle nudge, like tapping the first domino. Because what made him freeze wasn't the sentence itself. It was that I said it. In public. Unapologetically, with every room in his life watching. He froze because he knew the time for pretending was over. And so did I. I still keep both pendants now, mine and Emily's. I wear mine on days I need reminding. I keep hers in a drawer, next to a photo of us as kids in matching pajamas. She's sticking her tongue out. I'm trying to look serious. We were so young then. We had no idea what the world would ask of us, but maybe that's why we survived it. Because we learned, late and painfully, that integrity isn't just about catching lies. It's about not letting them remake you. Not letting someone else's fraud become your foundation. Not mistaking silence for strength, and not waiting to be chosen when you already know your worth. The final irony? The card I gave them, Graham and Emily, was never opened. I found it weeks later when Emily returned some of the gifts, unopened, untouched. I opened it myself out of curiosity. Inside was a simple message I'd written months before any of this happened. I hope this is the beginning of something honest. Claire, maybe it was. Just not the way I expected. Maybe that's what truth is. Not a destination. Just the moment everything false falls away. And you finally breathe. Sometimes I still think about that ballroom. The white orchids, the linen napkins folded like doves, the taste of champagne I never drank. The weight of a room teetering between celebration and collapse. I used to believe that justice looked like courtrooms and handcuffs, but now I think it looks quieter, like the sound of your own voice in a room that's never heard it before. Like a sister sitting across from you, eyes unguarded, like a mother returning something she once forgot was yours. The truth didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the lost years or rebuild what was broken overnight. But it gave me something else. It gave me peace. The kind you earn, not ask for. The kind you build yourself from scraps of courage and the ache of being invisible too long. I still walk into rooms where people underestimate me. The difference now is I let them. Because I've learned something Graham never understood. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to be right. And when the moment comes, when the toast is midair and the lie is hanging like mist, all it takes is one sentence, one truth, and everything changes.